everybody. It's a gorgeous day. Gorgeous day. Come here.
20th Century Fox presents the story of Carla Moran,
Okay, now look.
the most extraordinary case in the history of psychic research.
Everything broke loose. It went crazy, and everything was shaking. The bed was shaking, and the walls were shaking, and...
Like an earthquake.
No, it wasn't like an earthquake. It was much stronger than any earthquake.
Oh, wait a minute. Honey, I don't really understand this. You were attacked? Or you weren't? It happened. I was raped.
You were raped by whom?
I don't know. There was no one there.
A team of experts will investigate her life.
Why does he attack you, Carla? Not anyone else.
Why is she going to such lengths to support this delusion?
Okay, we're going to talk about The Entity. This comes from the early 80s. It's directed by a man named Sidney Furie, and it's based on an apparently true story of a woman who has been repeatedly assaulted sexually by a ghost. The characteristics of this haunting go anywhere as benign as a foul smell to as horrifying as a spiritual rape scene, I guess.
Like a number of them, like yes. In front of family members. Like, yeah, it's...
And it is made particularly horrifying because, yeah, she is a single mother in a house full of younger children, and it's not kept secret from them. Everybody knows what's going on. And they're kind of prisoners of poverty, too. They can't move. There's no place for them to go but to be homeless. So it's the story is compelling and horrifying just on its face, but there's something to be said for the execution. People seem to be very mixed on this film. Some people think it's absolutely horrifying and like an A-level thriller. Martin Scorsese calls it one of the most terrifying movies ever made. And there are other people who think it's, trashy and derivative, torture porny cinema. Where do you land on The Entity?
I was not really familiar with The Entity at all. So to just not even read the back and just watch the movie, I was really...
shocked?
But I'm really impressed, though, just with, like, I think the idea of it was something that the topic isn't touched on. And there's already that kind of question that maybe not so much now, but when a woman claims that she's been raped, how much, trust or belief in what her claims are, like, at this time, that in and of itself would have, come into question, but then you throw on the added bit that it is a ghost that's doing it.
Yeah. Obviously, people don't believe her right away.
Yeah, and then there's... obviously, the family does, and the way that the movie kind of portrays it is that they're completely 100% aware of it, and I'm sure that's, I guess, how the story actually went, how she claimed.
Yeah.
But then when the bruises would show up, and she goes to talk with Ron Silver.
Psychiatrist, yeah.
And he thinks that it's self-inflicted.
Yeah.
Even though there's no way that she could have contorted her body to actually have done anything like that to herself. That kind of throws me in something. It was just kind of like a red flag that stood out to me as a weird.
It takes him a long time to believe her, but I do think they made a real effort in this movie to make it as real world as possible.
Yeah.
So in this world,
oh,
people do not get raped by ghosts. And she does exhibit a lot of these behaviors of, sort of, she's been abandoned by her husband, she's sort of, she's poor, she drinks a lot, she's under a lot of stress, and she needs some outlet to put all her frustrations into. And if she can find a legitimate one, is she inventing one in this evil spirit? The movie doesn't play the ambiguity of it. I mean, we know that this is real, but the other people who she tells...
Oh, absolutely, and they do a good job of that,
And her neighbor doesn't believe it until she witnesses it directly.
Yeah.
And I think in the real world, and I speak as, like I say, a fairly skeptical person, maybe that is what I need. I mean, maybe there is nothing that you could say to me that would make me believe there was a ghost. But if I walked into your kitchen and there was a ghost there, I would believe there was a ghost. Okay, you got me.
Yeah.
I think Barbara Hershey gives a pretty brave performance.
Oh, absolutely, she does. Because there's a point in it where she even just look in her eye makes you go, is she just crazy? And despite the fact that we've seen all this happen, she gives these pretty amazing looks that you just go, what's going on in her head? Yeah.
In a movie full of horrifying moments, I think one of the scariest things to me is the first time she is slapped. You hear the sound effect of a slap, and her face goes to the side, and she brings her fingers up to her face, and she's bleeding just a little bit.
Yeah. And
she looks at herself in the mirror, and she looks at herself like she is crazy.
Yeah.
And then the attack really begins.
Yeah.
It's utterly chilling, and I'm just I totally understand how this would hit somebody and be like, I will not be in my house alone again tonight after I watch this movie, you know.
But then realizing that there is no way to get away from it, because then the car scene happens, and it's like this is like attached to you, and it's just gonna do whatever it wants, whenever it wants to.
And I think that's sort of the interesting thing about the true case and about sort of cases like this, maybe less severe sort of poltergeisty things, that the phenomenon sort of centers around a person. It's not a house, typically. It's not a haunted house. It's a spirit that is obsessed with them. And that, I think, also gives compelling evidence that it is something that is coming from them. But again, according to this movie, there's a ghost, and I have no problem with taking that ride with it. I think where the wheels get a little bit creaky for me is in the third act, when we get to this elaborate sort of gymnasium ghost mousetrap sequence.
A replica of house.
It's like they had a really brilliant, really terrifying concept, but they didn't really have a complete story to tell, because, you know, even according to the true life, in quotation accounts, this happened for a long time and then it didn't. So they're trying to manufacture some sort of satisfactory climax or, you know, release or peak to the end of the movie. And it sort of culminates in this, it really looks like a gymnasium of a high school that they retrofitted to catch ghosts.
Yeah. they have the resources devoted to this in parapsychology.
Well, this was millions of dollars at work. This guy really called in every favor that he had.
But Barbara Hershey, I mean, will just takes it to another level.
Yeah, and I do think that I would warn anybody who's watching it. This is fairly graphic in the portrayals of the attacks. You know, it could have been a lot harsher than it is, but I mean, I find it, you know, it's off-putting, and it should be. Yeah. It's like it's approached seriously.
Yes. Except some of the special effects are kind of dated.
Yeah.
Which takes you out of it a little bit, I think.
For a movie,
I can appreciate what they're saying and how awful it is, but that's not, and not that it has to be her, but there was like a weird sort of animatronic.
For a movie that was very early in the 80s, it's not as taxing to watch as some of the 80s cinemas that you'll see.
Yeah, I guess.
There's things like that I find amusing, like how the boardroom full of psychiatrists and doctors is just like everybody was smoking in there. It was just like billowing smoke. Everybody had huge beards and like was just chain smoking.
That was a comment from me.
And yeah, like you say, some of the electrical sparks. Yeah. Sort of the blue entity sparks that we see in the house, you know, just look drawn in and they're of the time. Yeah. I think if you saw this in 1980, you would be like, yeah, absolutely scary. I think some credit needs to be given to the soundtrack, even it is very synthy, but there's a specific percussion thing that happens when this entity is attacking. Quentin Tarantino is a big fan of it. He actually sampled it and uses it in *Inglourious Bastards*.
I didn't know that.
When the Shoshana character comes to the dinner table and she sees that she's about to eat supper with the man who killed her family. When she sees him, all of a sudden that same sound cue from the entity starts slamming. It's really sort of, it's weird. It's very specific 80s sounding thing. Yeah. But you would never, I don't think you would hear it nowadays unless it was in a movie made to be a throwback, emulating the 80s. But I do think it kind of works in the world of this entity movie.
Oh yeah, for sure.
What's compelling to me is the Barbara Hershey central performance and the sort of basic conceit of the movie. Like I say, I think that we kind of lose it a little bit in the third act. I'm trying to remember the specifics of the ghost trap.
I think it was
They recreated her house.
Yeah, but it was like all plexiglass, I think, and she had this one corner of the house that she had to get to. She'd hit the button, safety wall would come down, and then the house would be flooded with helium or nitrogen. Yeah. And then they came up with, and then this ghost was, for a short period of time, trapped in like this kind of icicle, kind of gooey form that's really, again, it just doesn't look very good.
And in a movie that's so trying to take itself seriously, too.
Yeah. And then, as you said, then she comes in and she makes some claim, says something about you will not ever own me or something like that. And then she leaves the house,
storms out,
and then they have that little the little trailer talking about that. Oh yeah, and then the ghosts periodically
would find her and mess with her again. Yeah. Again, there's no real satisfactory ending to this movie. It's like, here's a bunch of creepy scenes, and here's how maybe they would try to treat it.
Yeah.
And credits. But I do think it's worth a look. I do think it's interesting. I don't think it's going to rank super high on the list for me, but I do think that I would recommend it to people. It's weird because for a movie that seems to be so divisive in a love or hate category, I kind of land somewhere in the middle there. I do think that it hits a primal nerve as far as that vulnerability. And I think especially if you're like a woman who lives alone, watching this movie could really just terrify you, I do find it creepy and compelling.
I think, again, the camera work in this one is good. There's some really awesome shots, just with like of her coming home. Her house is on that slant, and they've turned the camera so it's on the slant so that the road actually looks perfectly flat, but now the house is kind of on an angle, and she's off, and it really kind of sets a mood of like things are different now. This house is askew, or this world is now kind of shifted a bit.
And I appreciate how, with the exception of one scene where they genuinely just surprise you out of nowhere with the attack, you feel the attacks coming before they happen.
Yeah.
You're like psychologically right with her. She's just reading her book and everything's fine, and then she stops and you're like right there with her. There's just they drag you into it.
Yeah.
And again, that's where this movie really works. It's Barbara Hershey alone in her room at night. Yikes.
Yeah. And just in the bathroom, that bathroom scene is just
troubling.
Because you are so vulnerable. You've just gotten out of the bath. The floor's wet. You're vulnerable.
It's a classic horror movie conceit. A lot of people complain, why do they always have to have nudity in these horror movies? Well, despite, other than the fact that people like nudity, there is, exactly like you say, this sort of feeling of vulnerability. There's really like, you only would strip off your clothes in a place where you felt safe and secure.
Yeah.
And to be attacked in a place where you are the most safe and secure is horrifying.
Yeah.